Okay, so we're here to very briefly just go over the procedures and the method of mining a text. This is actually a strategy that was shared with us by Carla Espana, the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project consultant that worked with us in the summer of 2015 for our Writers Workshop training. She was working primarily with the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers. And this is something that she advises for teams to go through when they're entering a unit of study on a certain genre of writing, that they sit down as a team with a mentor text or a piece that they are considering using as the kind of the anchor piece to hold them throughout their writing instruction. And as a team, sit down and really find out what's in this piece that's teachable. And as a team, what's our common language that we are going to be using when we teach this? And what are the things that we're going to make sure that we cover? And how are we going to use this as a text for reading and a text for writing? So if we just briefly go over the process, she says that we just first need to select a text. And it is the advice to go ahead and make sure that it matches in genre with whatever the students are writing. So in this case, we are focusing on personal narrative writing. And we are using the mentor text by Amy Tan called Fish Cheeks. And Fish Cheeks is a very short blip, a very short memoir from Amy Tan's life, from a moment where she felt really embarrassed in front of a boy that she had a crush on. Okay, so this is probably going to take about 20-30 minutes with your team. You want to make sure that whatever piece you've selected kind of matches your text that you need to teach. I know that kind of sounds simple, but what I mean is if you know that you want to be teaching students how to integrate something like figurative language into their writing, you want to make sure that the text that you choose is rich in figurative language so that there's teachable moments there. If you're teaching nonlinear plot development, you want to make sure you choose a text that is not linear. So just keep that in mind when you're choosing. And you probably also want to keep it short because you want to be able to go back and refer to it a lot. And you want your team to be able to go through it pretty quickly in the meeting. Something that you should have out in front of you is I would suggest that you have your vertical alignment document out. I've pulled mine up online. I've got my reading teaks here. And then I'm going to scroll down to my writing teaks where I see the actual personal narrative writing teak right here. Okay. And then we can talk about the differences and the nuances between 6th, 7th, and then 8th. You might even scroll up to the literary text to borrow from some of their craft moves. And then something else that's really good to have out is your rubric. So you need to be asking yourself, what is it that you want your students to be able to do in their writing? And what are you going to be holding them accountable for? Because those things you're going to be holding them accountable for are what you're going to end up wanting to teach. So I've pulled up the rubric for narrative writing from Teachers College. It is in the units of study. You'll find it in the Writing Pathways book. And here we notice that they got the categories overall, lead, transitions, ending, and down to craft moves, spelling, punctuation, etc. Okay, so we would want this out, and we would want as a team to kind of familiarize ourselves with these things. So we were kind of thinking about these as we're reading the piece, so we can pull those parts out of the text that we feel are good teaching moments. Okay, so when you have all that present, you might also think about having your on-demand pieces out, or at least a compilation or a reflection on what those on-demand pieces were showing you in your team. This is simply so you are aware of the things that your students are already strong in, so you know which things need to be simply reviewed, or which things the students are dabbling with but they're not great at, so they need to be reinforced and taught more, or the things they might not even have in their writing at all that you know you need to teach a little bit in more depth. Okay? All right, so let's go into the piece. And if I was leading the team meeting, the first thing I would do is I would, and this is something that Carla advised us to do, is to simply start by chunking the text. Okay, so I'm just going to chunk the beginning, leave the middle, and kind of chunk the end. And this is just so that we stay focused and we don't bounce all over the place. And that we are able to pull out those craft moves that specifically lend themselves to leads or introductions, specifically lend themselves to developing that story, the central part of the story, and to the end. Okay? Because we know that we want to help our students with their intros, bodies, and conclusions. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to start reading this text And at this point, if no one on the team has read the text, you would need to stop and provide that time in the meeting to read the text. So if you haven't read it right now, go ahead and pause the video, and then we'll come back together and move forward. Okay, so we've all read the text, and one of the first things I want to point out is simply that, is that in the first couple of paragraphs, there's something there's a couple things I'm noticing. One thing I noticed that's really important, and something that we definitely need to be teaching our students, is how to start off a story, right? What's the characteristics of a good lead or a good introduction? And if I refer to my rubric, it'll say that I need to write a beginning that sets the story in motion, grounds it in a place or a situation, and includes details that will be important to the story. It might be a central issue or conflict, show story elements, or hint at character traits. Well, when I look at this piece, Amy Tan does this. And where I see this is she sets up the situation that she's in love, okay? She sets up that he was not Chinese. He was the minister's son. So we already are seeing a conflict of culture here. This is important to us. She's mentioning it. He's not Chinese. She is also saying that when he gets invited over to the house, that she cries. So in these first two paragraphs, she's doing exactly what that rubric was saying. She's setting the story in motion. She's showing a central conflict, and she is letting us know what the situation is. She is at home, and the minister's son, who she has a crush on, is going to come over to the house, and she's terrified by this. So we kind of want to write this down and hold our thinking. So you'll want to create with your team like a 2-column chart that on the left has the text, in the middle has the craft move. I'll talk to you about what goes in this third column in just a little bit. It's optional. But I might notice that in paragraphs 1 and 2, she is in love with a minister's son. She is embarrassed he is coming to her house. Okay? And the craft move here is develops a lead that sets up a situation and develops and establishes conflict and character. Okay? Okay. So if we return to the piece and we look at it for more of a specific craft move, that's kind of a foundational lesson, is how to craft a really good introduction. But if we get a little bit more specific, you've probably already noticed that there is a piece of figurative language in our first paragraph that is very teachable. And what I like about this figurative language in this piece is that it kind of addresses a need that I know I've seen with students, is our students know how to use similes. They know how to write similes. They're as brave as lions. But they don't necessarily understand why they're referring to themselves or comparing themselves with a lion and what that does for their text. Here, Amy Tan is matching her simile with not only the time of year, which is Christmas time, but also she's referring to Mary in the manger, which is a religious reference. And the minister's son that she has a crush on is religious. And so she's matching her simile with the culture of her characters, as well as the context of when the story is happening, the Christmas time. Okay, so she's matching that kind of nativity scene with her characters and her character's background. I think this is really great and teachable. You could talk to the students about why it's not as white as snow, or as white as white frosting, or as white as paint, or something like this. Okay, why has she chosen Mary in the manger? It's very teachable. So we'd want to go back to our chart and write that down. So in paragraph 1, be as white as Mary, simile. And here the craft move is figurative language. Not just that there's figurative language, but that matches the context or character in the story. Okay? At this point, what you want to do with your team is start sharing whole group and seeing what else we're noticing here. you might notice this stylistic move that she has of a series of questions to show the inner thinking of the character. Okay. They might even notice a positive here. There's some things that you might notice. Okay. So you want to pull out all those things, and then as a team decide, maybe there's 4 or 5 things. Which ones do we want to teach? Okay. At the least, which ones do we want to know we focused on that, we taught it, and we're expecting it to show up in their writing? Because what we might do as students is we might turn this chart back around in our classrooms, and we might add a 3rd column that says how this impacts my writing. Okay, so after you've gone over this with your students and they've been charting the types of craft moves that they're noticing in the piece, they might then have to create their own reflection. How did I try that in my writing? Is it showing up? So they might write something like, I tried a simile in my 3rd paragraph. And then what you have is students thinking about how this author has impacted their own writing. Okay, and you could have them do this as a share activity. You could have them do this as a reflection before they turn in a piece. Or you could have them do this alongside their writing so that they kind of have a chronological record of what they've done. If we go back to the piece, I want to just talk a little bit about the balance of kind of foundational writing instruction and then also those specific stylistic and craft moves. And you want to balance them. So it would be a suggestion that when you look at your rubric, for example, and you see that this first page really goes over kind of the foundation, right? Just a lead, transitions, and an ending to your story. But then as we move on, we have things like elaboration, craft, and then we have our grammar and conventions at the bottom. We want to not only have lessons that fit within structure and not only have lessons that fit within development or elaboration and craft. We kind of want both. So here in this piece, we've kind of already started doing that where we have our introduction focus as well as a craft move with the figurative language. We could do that throughout the whole piece as well. Your team might be noticing that she does a really good job punctuating the story at the beginning of her paragraphs with kind of these chronological transitions so that we know the series of events and how it's playing out. Or you might get as specific as looking at a specific paragraph that does a good job with imagery and paying attention to those powerful verbs that are creating those images and those sounds, or even her short stylistic sentence here that conveys her emotion. Okay, so as a team, take the time to have this open discussion about what you're noticing and what is it that we want to use this piece for? What's teachable with this piece? Okay. That is pretty much the process in a nutshell. And when you create this text, you might put some stars next to the ones that you say as a team, you know what? We are all going to make sure we point out that lead, and in our rubric, we're going to hold the students accountable for those qualities. Okay. It's my advice to not try to teach every single little craft move in the whole piece, because Tan's obviously a published and successful writer, and we want to pick out the things that we feel that the students can have the time to accomplish and do. So have those discussions with your team. Pick out those things that you really feel that would work well, and also take the time to flip back and forth between the reading and the writing teaks in your vertical alignment document, because what you'll notice is a lot of them line up. So for example, we pointed out the figurative language, the sensory language reading teak lines up with that really well. And so as you're teaching that writing move, you can also be teaching that reading skill. Okay. So that is mining a text in brief. I thank you guys for listening, and I hope this helps your teams as you are planning the use of mentor text and writer's workshop instruction. Have a great day.